Podcasting 103. Sponsors.
You will get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want.
Zig Ziglar. So how do I get sponsored as a podcaster? Well, when you've done your homework or hired WDN to do it for you, and you have a terrific, interesting, original podcast that's starting to get a significant amount of followers, it's time to get paid, right? Advertisers are actually seeking out great podcasts to sponsor. It's true. Think about it. The average podcast listener actively sought out your show and decided to listen to you rather than hundreds of others. It took a little bit of effort. And those listeners are the best listeners you can ask for. They're engaged, they're isolated, and they're valuable. Experienced advertisers know this. Also, you've got to be a little tech savvy to navigate the whole podcast world. A lot of people don't know podcasts exist, but the people who do are a little more tech savvy, a little smarter, a little more disposable income, and advertisers, again, know this. They're onto this thing. So you, as a podcaster, you've got a leg up on everyone else. But here's the thing. You'll need to commit at least one full show per week, and then a website or blog to show the entire library of all your podcasts. Advertisers can tell if you dropped off by the dates on your show. Everything's date stamped. As a matter of fact, some distributors, including iHeartRadio, wants at least 5 to 10 shows to see that you're serious before they'll add your stream to their networks. So before you go asking sponsors for money, they're going to want you to give them some numbers. So what are numbers? How do I get numbers? Numbers are basically ratings. It's proof that people are actually listening to and engaging with your podcast. So you'll need to initially spend some time building your podcast network, mainly in developing interesting and useful content, as we talked about before in Podcasting 102 content. Now, once you've got that up and running, you can start telling the world about it. If it's a great podcast, and with WDN's help, it will be great, people will start talking about your show and sharing it. And before you know it, you'll develop a measurable audience. Those metrics, otherwise known as your numbers, show how many people streamed your broadcast, how many downloaded it, and how many people subscribe to it. On iTunes, you can actually rate them too, and they'll take a look at that too. Then you'll need to promote yourself and your podcast everywhere you can. Mention it on your business cards, on your truck if you have one, on your answering machine messages or your voicemail. You don't really have answering machines anymore. On your Facebook page, on your website. And release your podcasts as audio podcasts and YouTube videos, and even Facebook live events if you have video capability. It'll take a little work to add all those numbers together, but you see, each outlet keeps its own viewer and listener statistics, and they all accumulate. And you get a cum. You get a bigger number from more sources. So the more places you could be at once, the more numbers you could end up with. Now, you can sell ads or sponsorships yourself. You can have somebody sponsor your show and run advertisements during your podcast, just like a radio program. A sponsorship is more like a long-term commitment, like for several weeks, several months, several years in some cases. And it involves a special announcement a couple of times during your show, something like, "This podcast is brought to you by Dingleberry's Ice Cream." Then maybe a live 30 or 60-second commercial sometime during the show, depending on your arrangement with your sponsor. Now, advertisements are a little different. They're shorter announcements of 15, 30, or 60 seconds. They can be 5 or 10 also, and there's a big 6-second thing going around. It can run during breaks on one or more of your shows. Depending on your advertiser or situation, ad buys can be as good as or better than sponsorships. So definitely think about sponsorships and ads, 2 ways of getting paid. Kind of similar, but they have a little bit of a difference. There's 3 main ways that your podcast can get ads or get sponsored. The first is to hit the streets and ask people for money yourself, and that's what most people do. Friends, family, local businesses, charities, complimentary associations, angels. Larger nonprofits also sponsor some podcasts. Obviously, if there's some synergy. If you're talking bad about them, they're not going to want anything to do with you. You can offer your sponsors a brief mention or a full-blown advertisement or two, depending on their budget and the structure of your show. There are also co-op dollars in some industries, like the automobile industry, for example. Under co-op programs, the manufacturers of the product subsidize 30 to 100% of retail advertising costs. This is a nice deal, and it's a use-it-or-lose-it situation. So many industries, like the auto dealers, would rather spend that money somewhere rather than lose it forever. And why not? On your podcast. Local retailers can accrue co-op funds based on their purchases from a manufacturer. So when the retailer runs an advertisement on your podcast featuring the manufacturer's product, the manufacturer reimburses the retailer for a predetermined portion of that ad cost, all the way up to the full cost sometimes. So why shouldn't you get that money, right? Finally, you can sponsor yourself. If you run your own business, you can be your own sponsor if that's what your podcast is about. If you're Ronnie's Roofing, you may just want to talk about roofing, and you might want to just mention your company a couple of times in a call to action. You might not want to talk about anything else except roofing. And you can champion your own business or cause or charity or band or book or whatever it is you do. Authors, consultants, speakers, and all kinds of business people have stories to tell and things to sell. You might fit perfectly in this category. And what a terrific avenue to really dig into your story and sell your wares, to get that emotional connection with existing and potential customers. The other way you can get sponsors is you can just wait and let them find you. If you build it, they will come. And when you build an awesome and consistent podcast and promote it religiously, people will begin to listen to it and follow it. And when you get a significant amount of followers, advertisers will begin to notice. At that point, don't be surprised to get several calls from advertisers and agencies. That sort of attention takes a little while to attract, so don't get discouraged if it doesn't happen overnight. You got to think long game here. Now, when thinking about sponsors and advertisers, is there anyone you should avoid? Well, look, podcast listeners, as we discussed before, they're not dumb. It takes a certain amount of technological prowess to subscribe to and download a podcast. It's a little beyond the capabilities of your typical Candy Crush grandma. Now, depending on your business or cause, if you can't wholeheartedly recommend a product or company or service, you might have to decline their money or risk looking hypocritical. And if you look hypocritical, people are going to tune out. You know what I mean? Remember, authenticity is important, as we talked about in content. So think of podcasts featuring natural alternative medicine running ads for freaking Zoloft. It'd be kind of jacked up, right? And obviously, you don't want to run competitors' advertisements during your show. But there are rare circumstances in which this could work for you. Say you want to get out of your business to become a full-time podcaster. Well, their money's green too. And people ask us, well, how many ads should I run per show? Well, people kind of get turned off if they hear too many advertisements and they flip the station, like they do on radio. But they kind of synchronize each other, so they've all got this handshake deal, and they all run ads on the 20s. That's just how that works. That's why when you flip radio stations, they all have commercials on at the same time. You didn't know that, did you? Anyway, you should limit your podcast advertisements of 30 to 60-second spots to 2 per episode, unless you're doing a live read for a sponsor. And you can make that live read seem like it's integrated into your program. And a lot of people are really good at it. You can become good at it, too, with a little bit of practice. Most people don't appreciate a lot of advertisements during a podcast. That's why they're listening to podcasts and not the radio. So who would create these ads? Well, you can ask your advertisers or sponsors if they have something they'd like to email you, and you can implement that MP3 and just mix it right into your show. Or you can write, record, and implement your own advertisements if you have that kind of ability and production chops. Honestly, don't do it if you're not really a professional. There's no bigger turnoff than an amateur-sounding advertisement. Now, WDN's sister, Brevard Marketing, specializes in creating authentic and original advertisements. And with over 30 years in broadcast media, Brevard Marketing can help you write and produce a professional-sounding advertisement that works. That's what we do. Now, if you got sponsorship down and you're ready to get a whole bunch of money in your pocket, run out there and get some advertisers and sponsors right now. And then, for equipment tips on a terrific-sounding show, check out Podcasting 104 Equipment coming up next. This is Chuck Fresh with WDN. Thanks for listening.